And I saw this huge disc-shaped craft, and I realized that thing had come for me. And it was like a lucid dream. And then I put both together. What I saw, this being that I saw looking at me, and this disc-shaped craft, this UFO, if you want. And I put the two together, and I guessed that Darrell Sims was right, and I had been taken, I had been abducted.
Okay, welcome, curious minds out there, to another episode of Flying Chariots The Rise. Today's guest is Brian Allan, and we want to talk about his latest book, Hole in the Sky. Brian Allan's work explores paranormal phenomena, focusing heavily on the idea of portals or gateways to another worlds. And that sounds very interesting. And it's the topic of your latest book, as I mentioned already, Hole in the Sky. So, welcome, and please, if you don't mind, introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay, Daniel, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for having me on your show. So, I'll take this right from the very start, how I got into this game from the start. And this happened when I was maybe 2 years old, just under, but it's around 2 years old. I woke up one morning and I was lying in my cot. You know, that I was still that young, I was in a cot. And the blankets were kind of over my head, and I could see out with one eye. And right about 6 feet from my couch, well, that's a meter and a half for continental audiences, okay? There was a baby grand piano. My father was a musician, and he had this baby grand piano in the bedroom. It's the only place that was a room big enough to take the thing. Anyway, I'm lying in my cot, and I'm looking out, 2 years old, and about 4 feet from me, 5 feet from me, between me and the piano, this thing is standing watching me. It maybe be I guess, about a meter and a half, just over a meter tall, I guess. It had its arms folded, and it was wearing a green one-piece uniform of some sort. Now, around its waist, it had a belt. Now, the thing was that it wasn't a belt, though, because where the buckle should have been, there was a device of some kind. It was it was some sort of device. Anyway, I saw this thing, and it didn't bother me too much because I'm only 2 years old. So I went back to sleep, and when I woke up, it had gone. And for years and years and years, I thought this thing was some sort of paranormal creature, an elf, a fairy, a gnome, whatever. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with a noted ufologist, an American guy called Darrell Sims. Now, I spoke to Darrell about this thing, and he said, "Dude," he said, "you were abducted." And this, I said, well, yeah, might have been, because that would explain an awful lot of things that have happened to me in my life. So I guess this thing was an ET, and I was abducted at age 2 years old and put back again. Because the odd thing was that in the same room, maybe a couple of months later, now remember, this is 1946. I was born in 44. This would be 1946. This was long before traditional UFOs were sort of disc-shaped craft. And I saw, it was like a lucid dream. And I saw this huge disc-shaped craft, and I realized that thing had come for me. And it was like a lucid dream. And then I put both together. What I saw, this being that I saw looking at me, and this disc-shaped craft, this UFO, if you want. And I put the two together, and I guessed that Darrell Sims was right, and I had been taken, I had been abducted. So that sort of set me off on the path that I've taken ever since. And I've had isolated incidents where I've encountered, well, I haven't seen a UFO close up. I've seen lights in the sky. Most people have seen that part of the phenomena. I haven't been fortunate enough to actually see a grounded craft. But I've seen lights in the sky doing very strange things. And like I say, I guess that's where it started. I would say that I got into the paranormal via UFO, ufology, not the other way around. But have I seen ghosts? Yeah, I've seen ghosts. Have I encountered poltergeist activity? Yeah, I've encountered that as well. Yeah, I've encountered it. But the thing is that I saw enough that I decided to stop it. Eventually, I just stopped doing it because I was, st- I'm not ashamed to say this. I was getting frightened. I was getting alarmed because there was too much happening. So I don't go out of my way to research it. Now, if somebody comes knocking at my door and say they've got a ghost in the house, and this has happened, still happens very occasionally, and can I help them? I'll go out and help them, but I don't seek it out. I don't actively go and research it because I'm too frightened by it now because of the possibilities of what can happen. Because I've had them in the house. Unfortunately, I've been able to get them to go. I've made them get out of my house. But I've had ghosts in the house that I brought in. They attached themselves to me when I've been out in cases. I brought them back to the house and I've managed to get rid of them because they were frightening my wife, all that kind of stuff. And it was not good. It wasn't good. So I guess it's about an active investigation. I would guess the last time was maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, because I just don't go out and seek out this stuff now. But as I say, if someone comes to the house and need help, I'll help them.
Mhm.
That's the way it goes. So
Very interesting so far. How old have you been when you saw the disc-shaped object again?
2 years old.
Oh, you're also 2 years old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was only a few weeks after I saw this being in the bedroom standing beside my cot, standing beside me.
Mhm. Very interesting. Um, what is your opinion when it comes to UFOs and these strange beings that people encounter in their living room sometimes or in the bedroom? What's your
Mhm.
opinion on where do these things come from?
Okay. Um, when they turn up in your bedroom, I guess it's just bad luck because these things can turn up anywhere and they don't come without being invited. Somehow you have created the conditions for them to get from where they are to where you are. And I don't necessarily think that they come from other planets either or other solar systems. I think they come from other versions of reality because I think we're surrounded by planes of existence that go out, innumerable planes of existence, other realities that exist along beside our own. And sometimes they can cross from their reality to our reality. Fortunately, fortunately, they go back, or the ones that I've encountered went back, but they don't have to go. They can stay here if they want to stay here. I believe that as well. But I think they exist in parallel realities.
Parallel realities. Um, I also think that some of these phenomena could be created by ourselves, by our consciousness.
Oh,
We
yes,
are
yeah,
we
yeah,
are
yeah.
responsible for some of these phenomena. If we see UFOs, sometimes people, two or three people, see a UFO, but
Hmm.
everybody has a different experience. That's strange
Sure,
sometimes, you know.
sure.
And I think that our consciousness could be responsible for some of these sightings. What do you think?
I think you're probably right because to a certain extent, we create our own reality. And I've heard it argued quite convincing that what we create the world we're actually looking at, from microsecond to microsecond. We are actually creating the reality. We can see it, we can touch it, and it's real. It's subjectively real or objectively real. But other people might not be seeing the same thing that we are seeing. And when they are, it becomes what's called a consensus reality. And that people agree with what you're seeing, so you're both seeing the same thing. But it's not necessarily the case, I don't think.
Hmm, very interesting. I believe that it could be possible that the different alternative realities or dimensions lie on top of each other like several layers of transparent film, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
You remove one of them, you can see the reality that lies underneath it, and it goes on like this the
Hmm.
more films you remove. Um, yeah, but if you only knew how to remove these layers of film, that would be good. Then you could see the different dimensions or levels without really traveling, because we talk about time travel or
Sure,
traveling through
sure, sure.
dimensions. I think it's all within us. If we go into medicine, maybe we see that chemical imbalances in our brain can cause us to hallucinate, right?
Sure.
Or
I think I do believe though that our brain will filter out a lot of stuff, okay? Because I think our brain creates the reality that we see because there's so much garbage out there that our brain filters out that allows us to function in the reality we're in because we are our own guardians because there's so much stuff out there that I think that stuff could be existing right beside you and it would scare the living hell out of you. That our brain won't allow us to see it because it is aware of that. Our brain can see this. It just doesn't transmit it through to our consciousness. It keeps us safe, in other words. I believe. I believe. I may be wrong, of course.
Mhm. I'd say before we dive deeper into your book, Hole in the Sky, um, another thing that I want to mention when it comes to portals,
Yeah, yeah.
do you do you sometimes think that yeah, we're talking about portal places in a minute, or places that are said to be portal places and maybe ancient portal stuff like that.
Uh,
But I think that a portal can be opened within ourselves too. If we dream, for example, we talk about out of body experiences,
mhm.
lucid dreaming,
Sure, sure.
stuff like that. I think that's some kind of portal too into another world, but because some dreams are very strange.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I can tell you is that I tried for a long, long time to train myself to lucid dream because I can say this to you and Dustin there that and your audience and the audience, of course, that if you've never had a lucid dream, they are absolutely amazing because you're dreaming, you know you're dreaming, you're aware that you're dreaming, and you suddenly realize you can do what the hell you want. You can do anything you want. You won't harm yourself, but you can do anything you want to do in a lucid dream because you know you're dreaming. And that the human brain is limitless in the kind of stuff it can imagine from you. But myself, on the occasions that I do have a lucid dream, my favorite thing to do is to fly. Okay. I just literally lift off the ground and fly. It's just so amazing. And the town I was brought in, it's not where I live now, but the town that I was brought up in, it's maybe about 10 miles away from here. And I fly around that town over the high street, all the streets and the houses, and I come down quite low, and people are looking up and pointing at me, and I'm going, "Yeah, this is amazing." But I can tell you this to the audience that if you've never experienced a lucid dream, you've never lived because they are amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Um, I tried it for a long time too, but it never happened to me, man. I don't know. I
It
keep on
will, it
trying.
will. Keep on trying, dude. Keep on trying.
Interesting. You said the human brain is limitless. I would slightly disagree because
Sure.
I'd say not the brain is limitless. I'd say the consciousness is limitless.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But Dustin, you wanna go on? You have a question before I?
No,
Yeah,
absolutely no. Yes, sorry.
I was gonna ask you if you knew much about Iceland because we're talking about interdimensional beings too. Because I just had a guest recently talking about Iceland having these elves that are interdimensional, and I guess the
Mhm.
government is actually dead serious about these elves too, where they even had to ask to move certain rocks to build certain roads, and if
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
if they
yeah, yeah.
don't do that, the
Yeah, yeah.
machinery will break down, people will get sick or even die. And then even like there's even sexual relationships with some of the people there in Iceland with some of these interdimensional beings, and then some of these people just disappear on the edge of Iceland. I don't know if that has some parallels too with these interdimensional even UFOs.
Well, Dustin, the thing that you're talking about is that these beings, these elves, call them what you like, fairies, elves, the things that I know what you're talking about. Don't move that don't move that rock. You mustn't move that rock because if you
Mhm.
do, you'll piss the elves off and they'll mess with you. And the thing is, you didn't say they do. They will mess. The machinery will break down. People will get sick,
Mhm.
and they usually have to. If the rock's been moved, I've actually heard of them having to move the rock back again, put it back where they got it, and then they were fine. And that they would maybe have to reroute the road or whatever. But the elves were happy, so they stopped. They didn't mess with the people anymore. So yes, this can actually happen. Absolutely, of course it can. Yeah, this is why on investigations that I've been on, and some of them, well, one of my books in particular deals with it with the one cases that I've been involved in. And it touches on a lot of that as well, because some of the cases that I've been involved with, it's not just haunted houses or haunted buildings, it's haunted people, it's haunted locations, or saying haunted locations, but stuff happens. And what we found is that in areas where this does happen, there tends to be a strong geomagnetic presence there, and you tend to find, well, I've found that in areas, especially in the USA, but Skinwalker Ranch is a classic example of this. Underneath Skinwalker Ranch, there's a powerful geomagnetic presence. And I think governments know this as well. It's like when you see like pictures of UFOs or whatever they are disappearing into hillsides and appearing at the other side. Um, that's not just confined to Skinwalker Ranch, that's planet wide. But when that happens, there is always an area of geomagnetism close at hand. So I don't know what the link precisely is, but there is a link between geomagnetism and the presence of, shall we say, strange, anomalous encounters, shall we say. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that these ley lines could have something to do with it too?
Ley lines, I keep an open mind on ley lines. Do they exist? Maybe they do. I won't say they don't, but I haven't seen any sort of strong evidence to say that they do. And I think that where there are, we'll say that over a period of land, over a country, you get events occurring, and sometimes they occur in more or less straight lines. If you back off from the map and look at it, you tend to find the events are all clustered around an area. And there tends to be, again, a geomagnetic anomaly somewhere around there that seems to enable it. I say why it does this, I don't know. I just know that there is this relationship between geomagnetism and hauntings, call them what you like, UFO events, related events, all sorts of stuff like that seem to need a component of geomagnetism to function. Exactly why that should be, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. Also don't know what to think about these ley lines. Hear about it all the time. People.
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah.
But don't know. But let's talk about your book now. Your book suggests that there are locations on Earth where one can literally step from one world into another. Maybe tell us about the idea of portals, and especially you're talking about a place called the Rosslyn Chapel, which I've
yeah.
So yeah, let us know what is.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you the story how this developed about what we found in Rosslyn Chapel. Rosslyn Chapel has been there. It's been around since the mid 1400s. It took 50 years to build. I think they started off building it sometime around 1420, 1430, and they finished it like 50 years later. Because if you've never been to Rosslyn Chapel, I can assure you it's well worth the visit, because it ain't big, but this is not a big place. It's relatively small, and it's still a functioning church. It serves, pardon me, as a chapel. And on Sunday, the church services and all the rest of it. So it is a functioning place of worship. Although everybody knows it as Rosslyn Chapel, it's actually got a different name. But sorry, its Sunday name is slightly different than Rosslyn Chapel, but it's easier to call it that. But I guess I first heard of it in the 1980s. I'd been working in the Middle East. I'd been working in Saudi Arabia at the time. I'd been there for about 9 years. And when I came home, I was catching up, reading the papers and stuff and doing stuff like that. And I came across mention of Rosslyn Chapel. But then I read a book, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, and a whole bunch of other books, and they all mentioned Rosslyn Chapel. So my wife and I took a run through and had a look at the place, and we sort of looked at it, and that was fine, and that was okay. And we came back a couple of times just because it was so interesting. But the first time I became aware there was something odd or very unique about this chapel, that would be in the mid-1990s. And if you're in Rosslyn Chapel and you face the east end of the chapel, which is where, the altar is, the main altar, against the east wall, of Rosslyn Chapel, there are 3 altars, small altars, set back. They're actually set into the wall. There are 4 altars. The 4th altar is called the High Altar, and it's called the High Altar because it's set right above the steps that go down into the crypt. So it can't be used for anything. But I think for the sake of balance, they just put an altar there so it would look better. But it can't be used for anything. But at the east end of the chapel, the altar on the left-hand side as you're facing the east end of the chapel, that is where we found this anomaly. My wife and I went up there, as I say, and I can't remember why, but I was standing talking to her, and my shoulders were against the altar. Now the altar's not very big; it's only maybe about, it comes up to my shoulder blades, just about. That's the height. It's not very deep, but it's maybe about yay big, maybe about 4 or 5 feet across. Not big. And I was leaning, I had my shoulders against the altar, then all of a sudden, my arms just started doing that. They started lifting up from my sides, and I wasn't doing this. They started just floating up. I thought, that's a bit odd. Then it was almost as though someone had like there was somebody under my heels, and it was lifting my heels off the floor. And literally, I came off the floor and I stumbled forward. I wasn't floating around or anything, but I realized there was something lifting me up off the ground. And I thought that was a bit strange. So I asked my wife to go and stand in the same position that I'd been standing in, and she felt this odd sensation as well. And there was like an uprush of cold air coming from the floor. It was very strange. So we just left it at that, and they say, well, I've got to come back here with people who are a bit more receptive to this sort of stuff than I am. And I'm sorry if you can hear barking in the background. We've got my daughter's 3 dogs in here, and they're all barking like hell in the living room, having a great time themselves. Anyway, that's another story. But yeah, so we came back a couple of times, and we brought psychic mediums with us. And these mediums, they had a great time. Now, we didn't tell them anything about the chapel. They had never been there before, and the mediums didn't know one another, so there was no sort of collusion between them prior to this. Anyway, they all came into the chapel, and my wife and I went with 2 of them, and I went with the other 2. There was 4 mediums altogether. They were actually married couples, so they were married to each other. Now, we didn't tell them anything. We just walked them around the chapel, kept our mouths shut, and just let them talk. And it wasn't until they came to this altar that we'd been at that they stopped and said, "Oh, there's something here. We can feel." They called it an astral doorway. That was their description of the thing, was an astral doorway. In fact, one of them was saying, "Oh, they want me to bring them through," and there was almost as if something on their, they were seeing something. There was like hands reaching out to them, asking them to bring them to our reality from the other side of this altar, this doorway. So then the thing was that a lot of people who were in the chapel at the time, because people pay their money, they come in and they visit the chapel and they go out again. Now, we were there doing this stuff, and we were starting to they were starting to attract attention from a lot of the people that were there. And the mediums were getting a bit embarrassed, quite frankly. And they said, "Look, we'll need to stop this." And I said, "I think you're right," because we were starting to attract quite a crowd of people, and they were all sort of standing there listening. So we said, "Well, that's it, guys, we're off." So we just left. We just left it at that. We went back another couple of times with the mediums, but we just left it. We didn't push anything. And it wasn't until, I guess, but the 2000s, about 2005, 2006, that we decided to actually do something positive about this, because I'd come across the concept of some buildings react to specific frequencies of sound. And a friend of mine who was a professional musician, and he had worked out, we knew that this concept of something called the augmented fourth, which it's a tritone. It's a piece of music that the Catholic Church banned in the Middle Ages. It's a chord, a particular chord, because it can produce in people feelings of unease. And the banned its use in church music completely. That's okay now, because that was all banned, that all stopped. But they prescribed its use in church music in the Middle Ages, this augmented fourth. So we came up with the concept of recreating this. In the mid-90s, well, I'd been talking to this guy called Bill Downey, and we'd come up with this chord. It was C#, F, and A was the sequence of notes. Okay, C#, F, and A. and they correspond to a series of frequencies. And the F sharp is 370 hertz, C is 535 hertz, and the note A is 880 hertz. So we were aware by this time that the chapel responded to specific frequencies. So we got a signal generator, and we worked out a chord, and we took the signal generator and we asked for, pardon me, we did ask for permission to do this, just in case that the chapel authorities got a little bit upset about it. But we used these frequencies, but we also created another series of frequencies using a system called gematria. Now, gematria is an ancient system of transferring numerical values into words, okay? And we found out that we said F sharp 370 hertz, but in gematria, the word for Jesus, okay, is 373 hertz. Now, the chord C 535 hertz, when you come to the word Jesus, is 515 hertz, which is very close to 535. And in A, which is 880 hertz, we found out that Iesus, which is Greek for Jesus, is 888 hertz. So we created two sets of chords based on these two frequencies. And we played them in the chapel. Now, the odd thing was that there were maybe about 6 of us who went through that. And we got special permission to go into the chapel when there was no one there, because we didn't want to be attracting too much attention. And I think by this time, the chapel authorities were getting kind of, a bit iffy about letting us in anyway. So we got in, and we started the frequency going, and ooh, this is cool, this is pretty good. And the chapel started to respond to it. Now, one of the guys went downstairs into the crypt, and he started toning, just using his voice. He went down with some tuning forks that he could get his pitch, and he started toning downstairs, and he wasn't really aware of what was going on upstairs. Well, when he started toning, and the signal generator is producing this particular note, all of a sudden, a third note kicked off. The chapel was creating a third note. And we sort of looked at each other and said, well, we didn't expect that. Then all of a sudden, a few moments later, the chapel created another note. So the chapel is actually creating two notes, I suppose resonant frequencies based on what we were doing. But why the chapel would do that and create two of them, well, I don't know. I just don't know why it did that. But it's almost as if the chapel had been designed to do something like this. Anyway, when this is going on, one of the mediums, because we're taking mediums with us as well, she was standing with her back against this altar where I thought where I think this portal is. Oh, she says, oh my God. And she said, come over. So I went and stood and faced her. I was maybe about 6 feet from her. And the coldness was bitter, bitter cold. And you felt this coldness. This coldness was coming up from the floor. It was almost like a breeze. It was so powerful. And you could put your hands out like that on both sides. And it was like passing through a barrier. If you felt the intense cold, then you went through this barrier. Then you felt the normal temperature of the chapel, which isn't exactly warm. But it was a damn sight warmer than what was going on inside where the altar is. So we didn't know what to make of this, but we could see that some of the members of the people that were with us, they were starting to get a bit, shall we say, edgy. They weren't too happy about what was going on because they didn't understand what was going on. So that said, I didn't know what was going on either, but we were just prepared to go with it to see where it got us. But things started to, well, the sound volume, the sound quality in the chapel started to change, and there was a lot of this humming. This was all starting to build up and build up. So we're all looking at one another and said, I think we should actually stop this because we didn't know what was going to happen. And it was only because we were concerned for our own safety because we had no idea what was going to happen. So we said, right, let's stop this. Well, the guy down the stairs, he stopped toning, okay? Because he was still down there all this time. And things started to quieten off a little bit, but there was still this resonant, this hum was still going on. But as soon as we switched off the signal generator, the chapel it was almost like a switch going off, click. Everything just settled down again. So whatever was going on the chapel was responding to the tones, to the sound, to the frequencies, and where we believe that the portal is, it was particularly responding to it, but it was going bitter cold, and we just didn't know what was going to happen. We just didn't know, and we were all starting to get a bit edgy by this time, so we stopped doing it, and everything returned to normal. Now, we've tried to get back into the chapel a couple of times to do this in more depth and with more equipment, but the chapel authorities just refused to let us back in again, because I think they're afraid that something might happen and they could be held liable for it, basically. So the last time I was in Rosslyn Chapel was purely, I was just showing people around and showing us what happened. In fact, I was in with David Icke at one. You've heard of David Icke, obviously, I would imagine. Yeah, well, David Icke, he was in there as well, and we were showing him what was going on as well, and he was, he was quite interested. But we've had to stop it, and so as I say, I know where there's a portal. It's a Rosslyn Chapel. It's right in front of the altar on the east end of the chapel. We know how to activate it, but we don't know what would happen if we really opened it, because we never got that far.
What you just said is very interesting, because I have a friend here in Germany. He's a book publisher and a researcher himself, and he's going on portal research all the time. And he told me about chapels here in Germany, Austria, France, that he visited. And he also talked about frequencies. He's testing out frequencies, and they always have some strange frequencies, or well-known frequencies, so to speak. And he said they once went to this little chapel, and they also couldn't stay there. The frequencies made them literally sick. They made them vomit. They made them really sick. Just their presence activated something, and these frequencies made them feel bad, anxious, and sick. That's very similar to what you just told us. That's so interesting to hear that.
Oddly enough, just in parallel with this, we did quite a bit of work in what is called the up in Greyfriars Churchyard in Edinburgh. And we found in this churchyard, there's a lot of weird stuff happens in there as well. And we also found that as you go into this Covenanters, they call it the Covenanters prison. It's not a prison. It's actually maybe 100 meters long, and it's lined on both sides with mausoleums all the way down to the bottom. And we were doing some investigation in there. People had experienced stuff when they'd been in there on tours, because they do these what's called the City of the Dead tours, and they always end up in this Covenanters prison because of this reputation it has. And we found out that in some of the vaults, because I think all the vaults are open, nobody's actually buried in there. Well, we don't think there is anyway. Although there are still a few bones, I can assure you, there are bones lying on the ground when you go in there. They actually work their way up through the ground, up through it. They percolate to the surface. And in some of these vaults, we found that there was like a standing frequency in them that you could actually hear as a humming noise inside some of these vaults. So I don't think, as you rightly say, that the phenomenon is just tied to Rosslyn Chapel. It appears in all sorts of places, and the Covenanters prison is one of them. It appears in there as well in Edinburgh.
You think these humming noises, if you would withstand the feeling to go outside, if you would stay there, do you think these humming noises would open some kind of portal?
I don't know. All I know is that when we walked, I'm talking now about the Covenanters prison. I'm not talking about Rosslyn Chapel now. I'm talking about the Covenanters prison. As soon as you walked out of the mausoleums, when you walked out into the open air, it all just stopped. There was nothing. It was just absolutely normal. Everything was perfectly normal. And it wasn't in all of these mausoleums that you got this effect as well. Just one or two of them you got it. And it's almost as if, I don't say they were designed to do that, but it's maybe a factor of their actual physical size or how they're made that causes these noises to occur. Perhaps that there's external noises coming in and they're getting amplified by the actual structure itself, and they're coming out as something else. I can only speculate on that, but all I know for sure is that once you're in Rosslyn Chapel, and you're right in front of this, it's actually the St. Matthew altar. If anybody listening to this, if they type in Rosslyn Chapel, St. Matthew's altar, well, it should show them a picture of this thing. It'd be quite interesting if they want to look at it. But yeah, it's certainly Rosslyn Chapel will respond to specific frequencies. It could be, it was built by Sir William Sinclair back in the 1400s. Theoretically, it's supposed to have been the start of a cathedral. Well, not a cathedral, but a bigger church. This was to be what was called the Lady Chapel, which is what is Rosslyn Chapel now. It was designed to be part of a much bigger building, because when you go around the outside of Rosslyn Chapel, you can see unfinished, massive stone walls that are not finished. But we think it was designed to be like that. It's meant to be the replica of, I think it was called the Jerusalem Temple. It was built that way because it was meant to look that way. It was never intended to be a finished building. Rosslyn Chapel is what it is. And as I say, it's got some very strange properties about it. But if you ask questions about it, for example, at the east end of the chapel again, because most of the good stuff happens at the east end of the chapel. And if you're inside the chapel and you look up above, there's a circular window at the east end, and just above that, there's a little hexagonal box, if you want. And in that box, there's a red stone of some kind, a crystal of some kind. And when the sun comes up, it actually, well, we know this works because a friend of ours, when Rosslyn Chapel was getting the roof repaired, there was a lot of scaffold and stuff all around about it. And he climbed up with a powerful flashlight, and he climbed up to where this little box is, and he shone the flashlight into this box. And sure enough, there was a red light was projected inside the chapel. Now, the people who run the chapel, they do know about this, and they know what happens, that when the sun rises certain times of the year, it should produce this red dot of light inside the chapel. But even they say they don't know what it was designed to do, or they won't admit it, or what it was designed to do. But it was obviously designed for some reason. It could have been that there was a crucified Christ hanging from the ceiling, and it was designed to illuminate that. But that's only guesswork. We don't know, and they won't tell us anyway. But it was so that red light was designed to do something, but what it was designed to do, we don't know. But it's still there and it still works.
Going back to the humming noise, it's interesting because a few minutes ago we've talked about out-of-body experiences too, and astral travel, stuff like that. People experience this humming noise too when this out-of-body experience starts. Yeah. They feel the body vibrating and hear a very, very loud humming noise sometimes. That's interesting. It's similar. Very interesting.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I can't illuminate anything further on it because I don't know myself. Anything I would be saying would be pure speculation. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Of course. So does this chapel have an history when it comes to Freemasons or the Illuminati?
The Illuminati have nothing to do with Rosslyn Chapel. And it's arguable that the Freemasons have anything to do with it either. Because the Freemasons, as we know them, didn't exist when Rosslyn Chapel was built, okay? Although there certainly are Masonic symbols in the chapel. And I've actually got photographs of them, took photographs, pictures. And there are, Masonic markings, the two V's, the set, square, and compasses. They've been actually carved into some of the stonework in little out-of-the-way places. But it's possible, I've heard it argued that the people that built the chapel were Freemasons. But as I say, officially in the United Kingdom, at least, Freemasonry didn't exist before about the mid-1700s. But but other Freemasons will argue that this goes back to the building of the pyramids. It goes back thousands and thousands of years. And it may well do, but certainly there are Masonic symbols in the chapel. But I don't think it was built by Freemasons by any manner of means, no.
But it does mean they could have used it later to their advance. So,
well, can I just say this? That there are various groups try and hire the chapel, shall we say, to carry out ceremonies of different kinds, usually down in the crypt. And the chapel just won't allow it. They won't allow anybody in because people, they used to do this, but people would come up and they were dressed in all sorts of strange looking robes and they have no idea what they were doing down there. But they certainly don't let them do it now because it's not in their interest, I think, because people, people, as I say, it's used as a church. Don't forget, it's used as a church. And people, I think, thought it was being desecrated by what these people were doing down in the crypt. But they certainly don't do it now. But there's all sorts of stuff supposed to be buried in Rosslyn Chapel. For example, the mummified head of Jesus Christ is supposed to be in the chapel. And oddly enough, when we're talking about a portal or a gateway, one of the legends associated with the chapel is that the physical doorway to heaven is down under in the crypt underneath the yeah. And I wonder if that doorway to heaven, that this gateway, is a reference, some sort of obscure reference to the portal that's in the chapel. It could be that people have been aware of this. They've been aware of the effects of it, but they couldn't really ascribe it to anything. So they called it the doorway to heaven. They called it, and they said it was under. It was actually built. It was actually under the body of the chapel itself. But there again, nobody knows because many people have tried to get access. They've actually talked about, they've actually drilled holes in the floor and put down these cameras on the end of rope, these yeah, cameras with lights on, and they've tried to lower them down into the crypt below underneath it, but the chapel just won't let them do it anymore. They just refuse categorically. Well, they will not let them do it. Just won't let them do it.
Are you aware of any other phenomena in the area of the chapel? Like, are there a lot of, maybe, just to say something, UFO sightings
Yeah,
or beings and stuff like that?
yeah. I've heard, but most of the stuff, I can tell you a couple of tales, but that's what they are, they're tales. This is not fact, okay? People told me this, and because when you start digging around for information relating to Rosslyn Chapel, you find out a fair bit of stuff that's supposed to have happened. UFO sightings, yeah, sure, there's been UFO sightings. There's been sightings of things that you could argue were werewolves have actually been seen in that area. Shape-changing people, shape changers. And they seem to be, not so much for the chapel, but the area around the chapel. I mean, because you've got Rosslyn Castle is maybe half a mile, less than half a mile from Rosslyn Chapel, and it's down in the valley. And you can actually go down from the chapel and walk behind it and go down. You can actually see, you can get into the Rosslyn Castle. It's down there. And it's a pretty deep ravine that is down. So there's all sorts of strange stuff being associated with the area around Rosslyn. And I just wonder, I haven't been able to prove this because I don't know if there might be a geomagnetic anomaly down there as well. I don't know because we'd need to ask some, is it the British, it's the British Mines Authority, I think, might know about that. They might know what's down there. But I've never got around to asking them because I've always had just too much to do, too much other stuff going on at the time because Rosslyn Chapel is not my sole area that I've been into all sorts of stuff, but whether it be ufology, ghosts, the whole thing. I've been into so much that Rosslyn Chapel is the one that sort of catches people because it's made such a worldwide reputation for itself.
Hmm. Dustin, you want to go on?
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna ask about like any body of water, like lakes or ponds or even
There's
the
a
ocean.
Yeah, there's a river. There's certainly a river down there, and it
Okay,
runs quite close. But it's not like a huge river. It's just a glorified stream. But it's certainly down there, yeah. But
sure.
there's not a vast amount of water down there. No, it's not like beside a sea or a lake or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering because usually there's some weird phenomenon, usually around lakes or ponds or
Sure,
even the ocean, like UFOs popping out of the ocean too.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
If this portal truly exists and functions as you describe, what does this mean for our understanding of history and the capabilities of our ancestors?
Well, what I think, and bear in mind, this is what I think. It's not what I know. What I think. I think that when Sir William Sinclair had that chapel, because he paid for that chapel to be built, every last pfennig, mark, whatever, every last penny for that chapel was paid for by the Sinclair family. And he knew everything that was going into that chapel. Every last carving, yeah, it was produced in wood so that you could actually see what the carvings were before it was actually carved, and he gave it the go ahead. That I'm pretty sure he knew there was a portal there, and I think he actually created it, made it. How he did it, I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure he did that. But I think he built it to hide something. I think he put something through that portal where no one else could ever get their hands on it. It might be some religious secret. It might be, I don't know, the secret might be spiritual. It might be physical. I don't know. But I think when he built that chapel, he hid something through the portal on the other side of the portal where nobody could get at it ever, unless he knew exactly how to open the portal and get through it. But that I don't think is ever going to happen.
The Holy Grail.
Oh, hey, yeah, why not? Why
The
not?
Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, oh, the
Yeah.
Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Telepathy. I was about to ask the same. You not too long ago you mentioned that you once read a book called The Holy Grail, and it mentioned Rosslyn Chapel.
Oh no, I'm trying to remember the name of the book, which just clicked right out of my head again.
Or it was
It,
about the Holy Grail. Yeah.
well, it mentioned the Holy Grail, and it mentioned it mentioned Rosslyn Chapel, but there's a lot of books mentioned Rosslyn Chapel. Yeah, I've read a few books where Rosslyn Chapel crops up because that is, I think the first time I saw mention of Rosslyn Chapel was in a newspaper called The Scotsman. And they were doing a piece on restoration work that was going on at the chapel, and that's where I first came across it. And that would be in the 1980s. But it wasn't until the 1990s till I started to take a closer interest in it and I started looking at it, because the people in the chapel, it depends what you ask them, because the guides, once you start straying into areas that they're not happy about or happy about talking about, they'll just shut up. They won't say anything, and they won't tell you anything, which is very frustrating, because they're bound to know an awful lot more than they're willing to let on, and that's a pity, because I'm pretty sure, are there ghosts in the chapel? I believe there are. I believe there are a couple of ghosts in it, or at least one. But the paranormal events take place in and around the chapel? Yes, they do. But it depends what you define as a paranormal event. You could argue that UFOs are paranormal phenomena, or part of paranormal phenomena. I don't think they are. I think there's something else, but that's another story. Um, but the chapel itself, it is what it is. You pay your money, you go in, you have a look around, you come out, you go into the gift shop, you buy a gift, and you go home again, and that's about it. But my wife and I still go up, and we take friends up. And at one point, I was in the stage where they sort of knew who I was. They used to know, how you doing, Brian, when I was going in the door, sort of thing, because I wasn't there that often. But I'm not in that very often now, because for me, it served its purpose. I know that I'm never going to get around to actually unlocking that portal. It's just not going to happen. But I know it's there, and I know I've got a good idea how to do it. Put it that way.
Is Rosslyn Chapel the most interesting or significant portal place you've researched?
It's the only portal place that I've researched, because it's the only one where I know there is one and it is accessible. But these portals, they're not just physical objects that you can walk up to and sort of touch and all the rest of it. They exist in midair. They exist literally on the ground. They exist in the air. They exist underwater. They exist all over the place. What causes them? I don't know. I have no idea, and I'm not going to pretend that I do, because I don't. But all I know is that I know I know at least where there is one. I know what operates it, and I'm happy with that. But I suppose if I was brave enough, and we had the sort of the hard neck, as we would say in this country, if we're able to do it, we just go into the chapel, switch on the signal generators, pump them up, and just see what happened. But I don't think that would endear us too much to the people that own Rosslyn Chapel.
I was going to say, I live in Wisconsin, and we have a place here in Burlington, Wisconsin, where there's a forest nearby where this woman actually takes people on tours. There's a vortex out there, and she has people take Polaroid pictures and digital pictures in this certain area. And then when you look at the pictures back, they're all swirly,
Sure,
and
yeah,
some of
yeah.
them has orbs going in through it,
Yeah,
and there's
yeah,
the like
yeah.
double images of people walking. It's really trippy. So it's called the Burlington Vortex. Is there something different between a vortex or a portal? Is there kind of like a,
I
I don't
think
know.
they're both on the same side of the fence, put it that way. I think
Okay,
one is an extension of the other, or one maybe the vortex isn't a full portal, but I'd like to be. But
sure.
there's a building in Edinburgh that I think there's probably a portal in that, or some sort of portal, or something approaching a portal, because people have taken photographs inside that building. It's the Arthur Conan Doyle Centre in Edinburgh. I've been in it several times. I've given presentations in it, and people have taken photographs in this building. And the number that came out with this swirl in the middle of the photograph, and the woman who actually restored the place, Anne Traherne, um, one of her second book is called the port. It's called the Vortex. It's actually called the Vortex, and it relates to what's inside this building. But to look at it, it's a beautiful old building, incredible old place, and I wouldn't like to spend a night there. Put it that way. A friend of mine, a guy called Barry Fitzgerald, is a guy you'd be well advised to get on the show sometime. Barry, at the invitation of Anne, he spent the night there because up on the top floor of this building, they have a sort of a flat, a suite of rooms, that's a bathroom, bedroom. People can actually spend the night there if they want. And he spent the night there, himself. And I think he is an experienced ghost hunter, ghostbuster. And I think he was starting to get a bit edgy about some of the stuff because he was walking about this place during the night and before he went up and I tried to get asleep. But he was walking about this list and he knew something was following him. He knew there was somebody right at the back of him. He knew and he could feel there was another presence there. But he didn't panic and eventually just went upstairs and I think he actually got some sleep. But I think the daylight was starting to come up by the time he gets to sleep again. But yeah, that's the building, the Arthur Conan Doyle Centre. There's something very strange in that building as well. But that's just but it's not a patch on what's in Rosslyn, not even close. But there's something anomalous in that building. Yeah.
Hmm.
I'd say there's some ethical considerations when it comes to portals. Let's take Rosslyn Chapel,
Mhm.
for example. If this portal is indeed functional, would we and in case uh, we knew how to operate it, would we reveal this information to the public? And would we walk through this portal?
Would I walk through the portal? No. Would I get somebody else if they wanted? They could, by all means, they could do it. It wouldn't be me, because you could walk through the portal, but you have no idea if you'd get back again. And anyway, where does this portal go? No idea, not a clue. Is it another reality? Is it perhaps a reality that's very similar to ours, but just slightly different? There might be another version of you there. We just don't know because we have no idea what's on the other side of that portal or what's on the other side of that doorway or whatever. But it's not a thing I would willingly do, put it that way. And I don't think I could be paid to do it either because I might take a camera on the end of a long pole and push it through to see what's there.
Mhm.
But I think that's about as far as I would take it. Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if portal places and portals, if they exist, are, since I think that we could go visit other dimensions and uh, parallel universes or
Mhm.
alternative realities, we could visit them just by using our psychic abilities.
Mhm.
I do believe that. May sound a little bit esoteric, but I really do believe that it could be possible. Could be. I sometimes wonder if these portals are uh, a more primitive way that they used back then to access these places, or a more advanced way to access these places.
You introduce a whole range of subject, a whole range of questions there to which there are no real answers. Um, First of all, Are there other versions of reality out there? All you can say is probably yes, because you have no way of proving it. I mean, I've read books and books and books. I mean, I've read hundreds of books over the years dealing with every aspect you can think of the paranormal. And the only truthful answer they all come to is we don't know, because they don't know. All you can do is a best guess. That's what it might be, but you have no way of proving it. I know they've tried all sorts of stuff in laboratories and scientific experiments to prove this, to prove that, the next thing. Is Uri Geller genuine, or is he a fake? Is he a fraud? I tend to think Israeli intelligence wouldn't use him on the basis that they do if they didn't think there was something there. But Israeli intelligence service have used Geller for years for, if you like, remote viewing is another one. I think they've used them quite often as remote view stuff, and he probably can. I think I think on the basis of probability, he probably has talents, shall we say. Now, I remember seeing Geller the first time he appeared in the UK. Now, I'm going back 40 years ago on television. I saw the show he appeared on when it was Conjuring 6, basically, what he was doing. He was making stuff appear and disappear. And everybody's going gasp and all the rest of it. But the guy, don't forget, he was a nightclub entertainer. People tend to forget that. The guy is a showman and he's good at what he does. But I also think he has got a unique ability to remote view. And because I say the Israeli intelligence services wouldn't be using him, and they still use him to this day, to his talent, shall we say. So yeah, the guy's got something going for him. Some people do, some people don't. I've worked with mediums. I was a better medium than they were, put it that way. But I've also worked with mediums who were telling me stuff, and I used to bring them to the house, and they'd never seen my wife in their life, and they tell my wife stuff about her life and her parents, and you're going, how the hell do you do that? Where is this coming from? So these people can delve into consciousness. Maybe a telepathic thing. Maybe they're able to meld themselves into your memory and into your brain cells. Maybe they can pick up from the field that you're generating around about yourself. Maybe. But I said all these questions are maybes. Are they able to communicate with the dead? Maybe. Are ghosts the spirits of the dead? Maybe. But have I seen ghosts? Yes. I've seen ghosts. Sure I have. I've seen them 2 or 3 times. Have I been scared? Yeah, I've had a couple of frights. Believe me, I certainly have had a couple of frights, because when stuff happens they're not expecting, and people are expecting, you're the guy that's supposed to know about this stuff, and, and somebody's going, oh no, I'm getting out of here, yeah. But yeah, it can be quite frightening, because this is why, as I said, I don't do it anymore. I stopped doing it because I was getting too many frights. Simple as that.
Interesting. So, as a portal researcher, have you ever concentrated on the topic of CERN in Switzerland?
CERN, I know what CERN is. Yeah, I know what it is, but I don't see what that necessarily. I know it's been suggested at one point that they were going to create black holes in there, all sorts of stuff. They were going to create rips in the fabric of space-time, and the whole Earth was going to collapse into these holes. I've read all sorts of stuff about what was supposed to happen at CERN. All that's happening at CERN is they've spent an awful lot of money, billions of dollars, billions of pounds, billions of whatever, and they've been able to separate out different particles. They're getting to smaller and smaller particles to get the ultimate. I think it was the Higgs boson, if I remember rightly, was one of the things they actually found, actually proved it existed. But as to that being a portal, I suppose by extension it is, if they knew what to do with it, how to create it. Because whirling things round in a circle in a magnetic portal which is virtually what they're doing. I'm not too sure that would constitute a portal, although I suppose in one sense it does. But these portals, as I say, they're not. If something can pass through them physically, then that's something else again. But for the most part, what's in Rosslyn Chapel, I know works. I know how it works. Well, I know how it operates. I don't know how it works, but I know what it does. Put it that way. I know what it does. But and I know how to fire it up, but by using specific frequencies. And I know that oddly enough, it will respond to people with psychic ability. In fact, when the first time we really had this thing going, before we went up in the mid 2000s, to in 2005, 2006. Before we went up there to actually switch the thing on, that when mediums were up with us at the time, the mediums were picking up stuff at this portal, and we were going, where are they getting that from? But they're able to sense something of the actual unreality, the mixing of dimensions that's actually in there. That how Sir William Sinclair actually managed that, I don't have a clue, but I know that's there by design, and I think he uses it to hide something. And that's the best I can do with that portal of Rosslyn Chapel, because it's the only one that I can talk with on any authority. All the rest just guesswork. But I must assume that all portals work in the same fashion, and that possibly if you could tie another portal down to a specific location, a specific object, and you started bombarding with different sound frequencies, you might get a similar result. But that again is pure speculation. I don't know.
I was going to ask, do you remember in the beginning of the year here in America hearing about Miami at the mall where a portal opened up and 3 creatures came out of it, like ghostly, shadowy kind of creatures? And I think even some people even started taking shots, gunfire at these things, and they started glitching and stuff like that. And it caused such a ruckus where it looked like the whole state of Miami's police force was at this mall. Like there's over like 500 police cars. Like, and then the whole story was it was like some kid fight. Why would you need so many police there? And then there was so many stories, and there were so many people who were telling their stories of what they saw. And really scary shit. It makes you wonder, like, is there a big cover up? Is these portals starting opening up now because there's somewhat of an awakening within our government now, especially here in America with Congress talking about UFOs now. This makes you wonder what's around the corner here next year.
Well, Dustin, to be honest, that's the first time I've heard of that, but I'm going to Google it and have a look. But so do you know if they actually tried to check out this portal, if they had any idea what it was, what brought it into being? Is there anything written up anywhere in somebody's case files? They actually investigated this thing for what it was, or did they just let it die off and forget about it?
Yeah, it just kind of fizzled out. I mean, there was still some uproar. There's still like people who make videos and like, controversial if was it real, was it all fake? But then again, the heavy police presence, and there's actually like this one guy who had a father that was a police officer, a Miami police officer, and he like interviews his dad, and his dad wouldn't like spill the beans about what exactly happened there. And it's like, well, Jesus Christ. So like it's just a little clusterfuck of like everybody wanting to know what's up, or if there's a big cover up, or I don't know. So please look it up, and maybe you can find more. I
think you can guarantee there would be a cover up. They'd cover that up like hell. They'd make sure nobody gets to find out what that was. And for all you know, they have checked this out and tried, because if that actually happened and people just appeared out of nowhere and there they were, they will have checked it out and they would just slam the doors on it and close the case file. That's the last you'd hear about it. Because that's the kind of information because with the best will in the world, irrespective of which government is, if they could get technology like that, they'd weaponize it. You could guarantee they'd weaponize it. Absolutely sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Since Dustin mentioned all these videos about the Miami case, let's go back to CERN for a second, because recently there was an interview where a scientist named Dr. Astrid Stuckelberger said that she had met some other scientists at some kind of convention or so, and these scientists work at CERN, and they told her that there were indeed beings emerging from some kind of portal within CERN. I can provide you with the interview where she said that. It's very interesting that she said that like that. It's very interesting video. I sent the video to Dustin earlier that day, and I think he found it quite interesting too. And
well, Daniel, if you could send me that, I would just love to have a look at that. Really would.
I will provide you with the video right after we finish the recording. And close to CERN, where the Large Hadron Collider explores the secrets of the universe, there are fascinating legends surrounding an ancient Roman temple, once dedicated to the god Apollo. And mythology says that a demon will emerge from this temple through a hidden portal. at the
Mhm.
end of
Mhm.
all days. That's interesting. That's that this is within the space and the region of CERN. Interesting.
If I remember something correctly about Rosslyn Chapel, before the chapel was there, way, way back, there was a temple to Mithras on that site because you tend to find that these places are not built there for no reason. I mean, churches tend to be built there because something will be anomalous about that particular location where they built the church. And Rosslyn Chapel is no exception to that rule. I'm pretty sure that there was something to do with Mithras on that site where they built the chapel.
Wow, that's also
Yeah.
an interesting fact. Do you think that because there's and I we talked a bit about it before we started recording. You wrote a book on the Bridgewater Triangle, and it's a place known for its phenomena, different
Yeah,
phenomena,
yeah.
a lot of phenomena, UFOs, Bigfoot, ghost apparitions, stuff like that. And we have more places like that on Earth. There's some places where these phenomena are concentrated.
Well, look, but I'm going to have to watch my time because it was just only an hour I was going to be doing. But what I can run past you is this. About 15 miles from where I live, up in the hills, this is up in the hills, there's a there is a Neolithic burial site. The place is called Cairnpapel Hill. It's a Neolithic burial site, and there was three quite big Neolithic graves found up there. They were like with the headstones and all the rest of it, where the people are actually buried. And what they did eventually was they built a concrete dome over the actual burial site itself. You can go up there, you pay the money, you can go, you climb up the side of this mound, this dome, and you climb there and then you can walk around and come back out again and stuff. And people go up there because it's an interesting place, but I've heard it said that people that have gone up there after the place has been closed, got up there at night, not a lot of them stay too long because of stuff that still happens up on that site, on that Cairnpapel Hill. Whether it's associated with the fact there are Neolithic burials, actually Neolithic graves up there, is maybe a factor in this. But I know that not a lot of people stay up there too long on their own because it's a pretty lonely, scary place at the best of times because you're in the middle, literally in the middle of nowhere. You're up in the hills, you're in the middle of nowhere. And I could well imagine that it would be a prime location for really weird stuff happening. But we used to go up there on a fairly regular basis just because, okay, it was a good day out in the fresh air and all the rest of it. And it was an interesting place to take place. People that have never been to the place, take them up, let them see the place. But I haven't been up there for a couple of years. But there was a lot of stories of things being seen up at this Cairnpapel Hill, at the Neolithic graves up there. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. So we're almost at the end right now, but one last question. So
Sure.
I'm interested in how you came up with the name for your latest book, The Hole in the Sky. What was the
Well,
inspiration for the name?
how do you come up with any of these names? I just sort of rattle this stuff around in my head. Oh, the hole, that sounds quite good. I'll have that hole in the sky. There was no particular reason for it. It was just, it seemed like a good idea of where these things just drop through from their reality into ours. It's like a hole in the sky and they just drop in. So I guess that's what it was based on, I suppose.
It was very fitting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, as easy as that sometimes.
Yeah.
So, okay. Brian, thank you so much for your time. That was very, very interesting, and I hope we can meet again.
Absolutely, of course. Anytime. Just give me a shout. Only too pleased.
That would be great. Please stay with us for 2 more minutes, okay?
Sure.